Because we don't have any snow or weather to impede our attendance here tonight or interfere with our trip home. So thank you all for taking the time to be with us. We appreciate you coming out in weather like this. And it's, we think the program tonight is very worthwhile. We've got some very good information from Jim Boice coming up. I'm Stan Morse, your new president. And greetings for the new year and from your board and from me. We're going to start off the year with a very, very nice announcement. Actually, two announcements. But the first one is that tonight, the Board of Directors has decided to honor a former member of the board with the new title of Director Emeritus. I'm talking about Ginny Augustin. So that means she doesn't have to pay any dues the rest of her life. Right? That's kind of nice. Not as if she hasn't paid dues year after year in one form or another. And Ginny, your devotion and your love for this organization, I consider you the heart and soul of the society here in Millbrook. And I think many people will concur with that. I don't think it'll be any dissension whatsoever. Ginny's one of these people who puts her money where her mouth is. She has co-authored two very important historical books for our locality. One was with Jean Armstrong, co-authored that on the subject of Louise Tompkins, longtime historian in our community, well-known and loved figure, and Ginny and Jean put together a beautiful book. And then Ginny teamed up with her brother Stan and put together a second book of houses and the family memories and the structures in Tower Hill Road area. Is that correct? Farming, and so on. So we talk about someone who not only practices history, preserves it, protects it, but documents it, adds to the literature, and it's wonderful. You've just done so many things for us, Ginny, and we do appreciate it sincerely. Which then leads to the second announcement, because Ginny has long been, and most recently, our archivist. Now, not a degreed archivist. We don't have those things here in Millbrook. We're too small. But when the archive that came about in 2007 was originated, Mickey Briscoe was the general contractor who put the archive in place in the basement of the village hall. Ginny moved in, took over as archivist, and worked with a team of people. And I'm afraid to mention all the names because I might miss one or two, and I don't want to do that. But let's just put it this way, that without the leadership of Ginny, we wouldn't have the archive that we have today. And again, a marvelous, marvelous contribution to our community, so thank you again. And since Ginny has now decided to, quote, retire, I don't think you've seen the last of her, but any stretch of the imagination, I'm proud to announce tonight the name of an individual who has taken over the job as archivist for the Town of Washington, Village of Millbrook Historical Society. Her name is Kathleen Derringer. Many of you know her, some of you don't. We're going to try and get Kathleen to a future meeting. She unfortunately was not able to be with us tonight. But she is an historian and an archivist that's had an affiliation with Yale University. Archiving is not new to this person. She knows it well, she's done it, and she's jumped right in and she's taken over for Ginny. And we appreciate Ginny's help in getting Kathleen in, getting the assignment done, and a smooth transition. And the transition is taking place this month. So very happy to have Kathleen on board. We'll introduce her to you when she comes, hopefully in the February meeting. Okay, next item. We received a flyer from the Millbrook Library. One of the things that we are responsible for, I think we are responsible for in our society, in our community, is the dissemination of good information. It's historical in nature and educational and so on. And I was handed this flyer by Lorraine Gilardi just before the meeting. It has to do with a seminar that's coming up this Monday, January 27th at 6:30 at the library right here in the village. And it's on the subject of objects and memory, an illustrated talk by Jonathan Fine. Now we have little flyers, half-page flyers, they're blue in color. What we're gonna do is put these on the refreshment table and you can pick them up. If you're interested, take them home and hopefully you'll have some participation in that particular activity. So, we can do that. Have you got another one?
Yes.
Okay, fine, very good.
It's another historical thing.
Okay, yes, and this one comes courtesy of Merritt Bookstore. Robert and Johanna Titus, Saturday, January 25th, which is a week from Saturday. 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Merritt Bookstore. The Hudson Valley in the Ice Age, a Geological and History Tour. Books for sale, of course. Why not? You should have it. Flyer, and we'll make that available along with the first flyer having to do with the library. So thank you very much for this information. It's something we should do to pass along good educational and historical information to you. Okay. I'm going to bend your ear, but not for not too long. It's traditional in organizations, particularly starting, gracious, a while. This is really a stilted way to start it, but the President of the United States has a State of the Union address, right? Well, New York State, Governor Como has a State of the State. Tonight you're going to get a State of the Society from me. Oh, stand by. Okay, it's positive. It's very positive. As your incoming president, I've been out of the office now for 5 years, recalled, recycled, as we told you last year. But by the way, the report from Lori Duncan is positive that we know of. We don't have regular contact with her that is day-to-day contact, but the last contact we had was when we knew that she was out shopping with her daughter for the Christmas holidays, and she's undergoing treatments. And it's a rough hoe for her to handle, but she's handling it as well as I think she possibly can. Her attitude is very good, and we look forward to her rejoining our ranks later on in this year. Keep her in your prayers, please. She deserves it. She's a wonderful, wonderful leader. Now, her loss to us, which started this last September, has already been felt. And it was very apparent to me in the board meeting tonight that we have several loose ends. Even when you go without a president for just 4 months, that's all it takes to set your society not on edge, but, well, maybe it's not running as smoothly as it could. And that's why the board is putting the act back together. We took very positive actions tonight in the board meeting that preceded this meeting, and you'll see the results of those. But we took an assessment, I took an assessment of what it is this society is all about right now. And 3 very quick charts. Pros, cons, and challenges. The first one is our membership is our strength. It is with most organizations. I mean, it's almost like an old adage. Without your membership, you don't have an organization. The attendance here tonight is reflective of not only membership, but interest and energy and sincere involvement. And we appreciate that in no way. We have approximately 160 members, of which or whom? I guess which. About 50 are active. In other words, they come to almost every meeting or will come to a meeting. Right now, I think we have about 40 in the room. I would say probably 40 to 50 active members, and the others we want to draw back in. They're members. Let's get them more involved because they have obviously things to add and contribute to our organization. But the strength is our membership, and it's a good membership that we have. We have an amazing set of programs. An amazing set. And Allison Meyer is going to tell you about those programs in just a few minutes. We were a little late this year because of the transition. Lori leaving, and we didn't have our planning meeting until the second week in December. And then, in an hour and a half, we put together the most amazing program for this year, 2014. I think you'll see it. It starts tonight with Jim Boice and ends in the November timeframe with John Cady. So, and you got all that space in between, and we've got one good program right after another. But I'm stealing Allison's thunder. Our programs are wonderful, and that is a very, very fundamental element of what we do. Our archives, that Ginny and her team have put together in the past 6 years, from 2007 to now, well, 6 or 7 years. Not only one comment that I didn't like about the archives over the past 7 years. Stan, you buried it in the village hall, in the basement. Who can get to it? And the answer is, okay. That's what we did, because we knew at the time, when we made a very thorough and concerted assessment, we didn't have the funds to either buy a building or to build a building, which would have taken not only a significant resource, would have taken space and time particularly. And we were almost to the point, we weren't panicking, but we were at the urgent stage saying, we have this collection of information in closets and back rooms and cellars and attics and cars and trucks and everything all over the place. We need to bring it together. And that archive was developed in 2007. Ginny took it forward, and with her team, we have an amazing archive today. But that comment bothers me that it's buried in the village hall basement. I'm going to be addressing that with the board. How can we either open it up or make it more available? And that's one of the challenges that I'm going to take on as the new president. So that's for the archives. The finances, we're in the black. What more would you want? It's a very fundamental part of an organization. Without the funding, we can't survive, we can't do the things. The cameras, the refreshments, the mailings, the postage, it goes on and on and on. Even a small organization right here with so much volunteer effort and energy still requires a basic amount of money. Now, we got a nice gift. Frequently, the Tribute Garden will announce a gift for us, and they did so this last year. But for that gift, maybe my message wouldn't be quite so positive. Maybe it wouldn't be so much in the black, or maybe even in the black. So we have to pay attention to finances, but right now the report is positive, it's good. We have a surplus left over from last year, we're healthy, and we're good. Those are the pros, but if there are pros, what are the cons? You ready? There are none from my point of view, as your new leader and as the head for the board. We have a marvelous organization, we're doing positive things. What can anybody take us to task for or criticize us? And that's why I think we are what we are, because of the strength of our leadership, not leadership, our membership, our programs, all the people who know. I mean, the ideas and the volunteers in the board meetings tonight were just, wow, so pleasing. Because it wasn't pulling teeth or twisting arms to get people to do things. People are jumping up and saying, I want to do this, I want to do that, and it's wonderful. But that's not to say that we don't have challenges. I'm over 70, so I'm in that first group there, folks. Aging membership. Right now we're okay. 10 years from now we don't do something about aging membership? I don't think we'll be in that great shape. So we're going to have to put together something, and we will put together a program to go out, perhaps recruit younger people, more people. But aging membership, by the way, we're not unique in that area. What organization do you know of in any community, like ours or similar to ours, that doesn't have an aging membership problem? We're not unique, but we're going to make it head on, and we're going to address it. That brings me to the last one. We have 160 members in our organization. Give or take a 1 or 2. I don't count numbers that closely. Probably should. Membership dues, $25 a year single, $30 a year family membership. What other organization do you know charges such or has such a low fee structure? Kiwanis? No. Rotary? No. MBA? No. It goes on and on and on and on and on. For the money, you're getting tremendous value in return from your investment every year. So when I took over in November, first thing I did was ask Jim for a financial report, found that we were in black, and I said, okay, fine, what's the status of our dues and our membership? And and I got the shock of my life. I don't really think I want to tell you how many people, let's put it this way, are not up to date with the dues. All right? Let's just put it that way. So this is what they call a soft appeal to you. I'll tell you, the number is startlingly high. There could be a number of reasons. It could be the economy, it could be tight budgets, it could be family matters. It goes on and on as to what the reasons are why our dues are not being paid on time. So your board is putting together a program to bring the dues back to where they should. Now, 3 months ago, I have to admit, I was delinquent in my dues. No more. Because they said they wouldn't let me in as president unless they got it today. So we took care of that, and now I'm actually paid up to, I think it's 2018. So I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I'm not going to do. I'm going to put my money where the mouth is, and I'm going to ask, please, for your cooperation. Our dues are our lifeblood. Everything else is great, but we have to have the financial support. We don't want to run in the red. We don't want to go out of business. But we could in another year. It's that situation. Please, I plead with you, I ask you, I'll get down on my knees if necessary. Please, get your dues up to date. We have a plan for sending out regular reminders for people, general reminders, because we've gotten away from that. It wasn't Lori's fault, it wasn't anybody's fault, it just happened. It's what happens in organizations sometimes. And so, I'm pleading with you, please, bring your dues up to place. By and large, we are in marvelous shape as a society. Thank you for your membership. Thank you for your attendance tonight. Thank you for participation, your energy, your time. We love you. You're great. Now, enough talking. To the program. Allison Meyer, would you please come up and tell us first of all what the program is for 2014, and then would you be kind enough to introduce our guest speaker for tonight. Thank you.
Stan told you a lot about the programs, actually. Here's the program card. It's our January meeting, and we have it out. And that's a big step forward for us. I was thinking I should pull out some highlights of what we have, but they're all terrific programs again. I think we have a series of rich programs coming up. And as Stan said, you know, we get together once a year to put the programs together, and there's so much enthusiasm around the table. It's a lot of fun, I think, and we get a list of programs going, ideas, and we put them to the months, and we send our troops out to contact the people and the speakers, and then they have to report back. And we got all of that done in about a month. But I think we have a really nice lineup, and I don't know, I guess instead of going through them, I'm going to leave these on the table, and everyone should pick up a card on their way out. Because I don't think we'll mail them. I don't know if we'll mail them. Maybe
that may be a future consideration, but right now.
Yeah, I guess we will have to mail them for the people who aren't here yet. But anyway, you can pick up a card, because we have plenty. So that would be a great idea. So, and actually what I should do is mention next month's program as a startup, though. It's Millbrook's Italian Heritage, and there's a lot behind that. There's a special program going on in the town that the coordinator of that project is sitting here now, the two of them, and I don't know, I think it should be a lot of fun. We're going to gather, I think, families together and hear some of the history, some of the heritage that we have here in Millbrook that we may not even realize some of it, but it's some great stories I'm sure will come out of that. So I think I'll let you pick it up, but please do that. Okay, so now I get to introduce tonight's speaker, Boice. has been a longtime member of Historical Society, and probably a number of you have known him certainly far longer than I have. You've grown up with him. And he's contributed to our programs all through the years, really. But tonight, we're here to focus on antique machinery. And I think maybe I can say the story began in 1968 when Jim was manager of the mower shop for Reardon Briggs, which was located where Slammon's is now. And for the Dutchess County Fair, I guess Reardon Briggs was displaying International Harvester, a cadet tractor. And he thought, oh, bingo, I think what I should do is restore an engine, an old engine, to display along with that and maybe attract more attention on it. And apparently it worked very well. He pulled a lot of interest in, and over the years, 45 years later, in 2013, it was this group's, the group interested in that, it was their 45th year at the Dutchess County Fair. And that is the Century Museum Village, where you can view all the mechanical.
Correction there.
Okay, good.
We've done 45 years. The museum has been going 30.
Okay, I didn't know how long the museum had been there.
Yes, 37? 37 years.
37 years.
We were there before there was any museum.
Okay. Wow. And Jim has been president of the group for 30 years.
Yeah.
Used to be
Not now.
the conservation
Yeah.
department.
Yeah. Yes, I was going to say, because when I was young and before I ever knew I was moving to Millbrook, I remember that down behind, it was originally placed, the antique machinery display was placed down behind the
First aid building.
First aid building.
City police.
Yes, and next to DEC, so I remember those sheds, and I remember that. And so through the years, as the display was built out in the building for the Century Museum Village, I think it's quite an attraction for all ages
Very
to
much
go
so.
to. And whether you like to restore engines or not, it's a fascination just to listen to them. For many, it brings back memories, I think, of how the machines work, so just to hear their sounds. So, so tonight, we have a film that was created by the family, really, not the Century Village.
Very nice.
But it, basically for the family.
Raj, which is last name, girl.
Oh, what is it?
Raj Saroj.
Oh, yes, who did it?
Yes.
It's
In fact,
a
he might-
wonderful film.
I told him we were having it tonight. He might make it.
Oh, we might make it, oh,
He
good.
might.
Then you can give us some background on that maybe, but it's nicely put together, very nicely put together.
I had it done for Jim for his birthday.
Yes,
It was
so
for
it
the
was,
fair.
so, and we have been waiting, I think maybe, it was a year and a half ago when you had it made?
Yeah.
And as
Well,
Historical
yeah.
Society, we've been waiting to share it at a special time, so tonight is it. And it features Jim and your son, Jim, as well. So, I guess, well, and it's a 23-minute film, and I guess we'll run, well, and I'm introducing Jim, he's also going to stand up, I think, and
Yeah, I
give
got-
you a little background on
Just
some
a
of the
little background
engines
so the people
for local.
who get catch local,
That's right,
I-
local sites.
they might not.
That's
Catch.
right. And then we'll have questions and discussion afterwards. And this popcorn is to pass around. Everyone gets a sticker. Okay, thank you. Jim, it's yours.
I'm afraid it doesn't do your joints any good. This engine is on the sign here, that my brother got, I want to talk to him and read the history on that sign. He got all the way to Pennsylvania before he rescued it. And, but that is a sign of the exact engine that our first restoration. It wasn't actually the first engine I purchased, but it was the first engine restored. And the reason I got at it and restored it was because I ran the lawnmower shop for Reardon Briggs. And I thought this would be great publicity stuff. It worked out that way. And I had a friend who was with a radio station at the fairgrounds, a former neighbor, Eddie Rubluski, and Ed came along. I didn't have time to run the thing, too busy with the business. And Ed took over running it, and so anyway, that's how we got started at the fair. And after that, Sam Lloyd, who was then the manager of the fair, talked to me about the possibility of future displays during the fair. So the actual first engine that I purchased was from Estes Stevens. I was working for Franklin Bowman and Son, and the Gravely dealers up on 9 Partners Road. And he had lots of antiques around. It was a fascinating farm to go to. And I was there one day, and what's under all that sheet metal piled in there? Old engine. So he had to uncover it for me. Before I went home, I was my engine, so. Yeah. That started me collecting. Actually, the engine on the sign was the second engine I picked up, and the first one that I restored. That's came from Cookingham's Greenhouse in Rhinebeck, and just out on 308, and it's driving a corn sheller that came from the Flagler estate, Edgewood, Mrs. Carey's father, and the caretaker there was Cecil Warner, and he realized that I didn't have attachments to drive with, and attachments are as important as having the engines themselves. I don't like engines just by themselves. I want them hooked to something, doing what they originally did. And so we immediately got that set up, so that's been with us the whole time. I'm having the corn sheller with that 2 horsepower engine. For the first part, there'll be a little bit of introductory part. Then the IH engine and the corn sheller will be the first major. Then there's a wet log saw, which came from Ken Brown. Anybody here knew Ken Brown? Corner of Boice School Road and 44, where the tile silos are that they're restoring. Ken lived there for many years. And came to me in the lawnmower shop and wanted to get this wet log saw running at the elm tree he wanted to take down. So I put it back in running order for him, and then after that I borrowed it from him for the fair. Several years into the running it at the fair, there he and his wife came to the fair to see their saw run. He says to his wife, "Well, if you're here in time, I'm giving this saw to Jim. It's his saw. He doesn't bring it back this time." So, it's a nice piece of local history, and it originally had belonged to Mr. Coffin at the junction of Clinton Corners Road and 82, the big White House at Pierce's. There, well, that's where it originally had been. And Mr. Coffin's nephew went to New York City and got a good job. And as a present to his uncle, he bought this log saw. We've often wondered whether his uncle cussed him or blessed him. We couldn't use all that heavy thing around the woods, sawing down trees and sawing and bucking them up. But so it was a local piece of history there. And you'll see a John Deere cement mixer. That came from Ministry Foundation. Other than it was used down there building things, I don't have much history as far as it goes, but I thought for years that it was some blacksmith that made this arrangement up. I finally found literature with the pictures exactly as it is. John Deere made the whole thing. And then there'll be a 5 horsepower Whitty engine. The one that I got from Mr. Stevens, and that drives a 1900 Eureka ore crusher. And there'll be a Foose engine under a pavilion roof with its original pump with it. This came from the Gifford property. I bought it from Bill Gifford before the Arboretum bought the Gifford property. And Sally O'Brien has told stories about it plenty of time, about listening to it run early mornings when Chet White would go down to the pump house and back to the Gifford house way down the hill there. And we'd start up the engine, pump the water for the day up into a tank. It would be out where the parking lot is now. They had a water tower. They didn't use the house in the winter, so it didn't have to be, freeze proof. It just drain it and go south. That's an all original piece. We had to do a fair amount of mechanical restoration because mice had got inside of it. The shoulder and so on. Hadn't done things any good, but it's never been repainted. And you'll see more that's what we go for, is wherever possible, unrestored. People are more appreciating that. We thought when we started you had to paint everything. And that's not the case. With that pump, that's Gould pump, and of course Gould is still in business today. With that pump, and I went to Charlie Stills, and old Jim McIntosh was still alive at that time. Jim said, "Well, yeah, we got parts out back." Well, I got the parts you donated to me. They're probably the only customer they had for one of those. But they had packings and they had valves and some parts there, so. But other than him, there wasn't anybody around who knew what those parts were. You remember him, Skip? Okay, then there'll be a 1020 McCormick Deering tractor. I was given this tractor by George Rogers up in Mansfield. It originally was sold to McQuaid's, the farm down by somewhere around the infirmary, right? Yep. And apparently they made very little use of it. And George bought it, got it home, never did get it running. It sat out in the barnyard for years with the cows banging the radiator all up, good and proper with their horns. So, the radiator was pretty much destroyed. But when Jimmy was 14, he says, "Can I work on that tractor?" "Yeah, go ahead. You can work on that tractor, but you can't sell it. It stays in the family." So he was agreeable to that. So he pulled the engine all down, went through, pulled the pistons out, did the valve job, everything. It's been running ever since.
Almost
You
30
were
years now.
14 and you went, how old are you now?
43.
So it's been running a long time. And he'll describe more about it and tell about the work they've done with it in the field. And the last shot, the last two, next to last is our international auto wagon with 3 generations of Boice family all piled on. It's a 3/4 ton truck with high wheels. And then the last shot is my grandson, Jimmy's son, with his little dozer they did when he was 3. That was a restoration project. And
A lot of
he's
construction.
been, since 4 on, he'd drive it like an expert. Took right to that. What is it? That's a
Struck
struck.
manufacturing, and Evan actually has before his 3rd birthday, was begging me to get him a bulldozer that he could ride. He had push toys, he had walking plastic ones, he wanted something he could actually drive. And the little struts drive with hand controls, so it's like driving a skag mower or something. You push a lever forward, it goes forward on that track. You pull back, it goes back. So if you can reach the levers, any size with some coordination, you could drive it. So he sat in my lap as a 3-year-old with the most determined look you ever saw on his face and just took off driving it. By 4, he was on his own. You could just start him up and follow him and make sure he didn't get in any trouble, but he could go anywhere with
Park
it.
it on a dime, where you want it parked, put it right back in its place at the fair. So, and before we do the video, I want to give some recognition. My family has been very supportive of what I do. Carol encouraged me originally when Sam Lloyd talked about the display at the fair. Jonathan, Jimmy was too small to help move his equipment then. Helped me tremendously and so on. In fact, the first 2 or 3 years we did it, I was tied up with Beard and Braces display, and Jonathan, my brother, were in the corner, and Eddie Rubluski ran the show during the day, and I was there for the evenings. And it's been, and then Jimmy, Jimmy was oiling and greasing and things from a very young age, and he just naturally got involved into it. And if I didn't have the family to do this, I couldn't do it anymore. There was a time when I could crank any of the things in there, but no more. So, and another person that I'd like to, I'm sure a bunch of you know Tom Hennessy. The last 3 years, Tom has gotten very involved with, hey, Tom? Yeah, I hadn't seen you there before. Tom's gotten very involved with us and so on, and Tom has been a tremendous help in moving the equipment, and he comes evenings during the fair, and when we just sneak away, he's at the fair. And Tom has really started a nice collection of antique machinery. So your help is, Tom, is so much appreciated, what he does. And we need some younger people to, like him and Jimmy, to wrestle these things around. And then Bill and Ben Yeager and Darlene, they come for a lot of the fair, and Bill Jr. has done things with us since Bill had a license and Jimmy didn't, so they could go buy parts. And, so that's how long that they. And,
could you just tell me how old you have, or how young you can be to get a license for a tractor or a machine?
there is a license for the track.
I don't have
For the driver's license, you can't get
There
a...
isn't anything now for, there are states that are trying to implement that, and there's some federal standards they're trying to implement because of farm safety regulations and that, but there really isn't an age per se to do it. You can't drive them on the road
Okay.
legally until you're 16 because you need to have a driver's license
A regular
before you take
driver's
machinery on the road. But aside from that, there isn't any
On the-
requirements.
He says on the road.
Right.
I learned how to drive my uncle's farm all regular when I was 10. And it went up and down Fowler Road, Camille Road, plenty. Doing, not running around, but working. So, and I now have that tractor is now back in the family, so. Not restored, and it needs some restoration. Right now, presently, I'm doing the engine from the county infirmary, which has been a big job. It's a water pumping engine, weighs 2,350 pounds. So at that, I just wanted to recognize because the family has been so supportive of
We hope we have sound, because we just put the speakers on, and if we have it all.
Started out in construction, and we had lawnmower shops for a good number of years, all kinds of mechanical things. And then I went to the County Arboretum, in charge of vehicles and equipment and maintenance in general. A lot of my career has been mechanical. I enjoyed restoring, and then, to go out and show it to other people. There'd be no point in my restoring if I didn't have people to see what we do. This is the engine that started it all, how my hobby got started. This is a 1905 International Harvester, 2 horsepower, vertical engine. It runs on straight gasoline, it's hit and miss, water cooled, and it came from Ray Cookingham's greenhouse, right back here out on 308. His father bought it to water, he used a great deal of water in a greenhouse. So that was the purpose of purchasing it. It was actually an all-purpose engine, but that's what they happened to use it for. It's driving the corn shower, a double corn shower that the farmer would have to shower his corn for the chickens. This is a 1918 Galloway engine, and it's mounted on a portable truck so that the 4 wheels, so that you can move the engine around. This was a portable power plant of the early 1900s, so that you could do multiple tasks on it. You could shell corn, you could grind feed, saw wood. This is a early 1900s oat roller, and it was originally owned by Vassar College Farm. The purpose of it was to roll the oats for horses that had gum teeth. And they couldn't chew the oats, they would make rolled oats, just like you have rolled oat cereal today. And this is how they did it with this heavy machine. The way it works is you dump the oats in the top of it here, and it goes through a series of rollers. And the rollers push the oats so that you get rolled oats just like rolled oat cereal. This is an International Harvester buzzsaw rig. It's a 6 horsepower water-cooled engine, hit and miss governed, runs on gasoline. I purchased it from Weeks General Store in Cairo, New York, where he ran a custom sawing business with it, going around and sawing people's firewood. It's completely factory original. The factory made them this way with the truck under. The water cooling tower is a series of trays, and what it does is a sprinkler pipe in the top of it, and that lets the water out, down, sprinkles it over, and it drips down through these trays. That's its radiator. And without that, the engine will overheat very quickly. This is the buzzsaw, and this is the working end of the whole machine because it was a package. You got your buzzsaw blade here, right here. It's belt driven from the other side. And this was to saw long lengths of wood into short wood to use in your stove. This is a 6 horsepower Hercules gas engine. It's a throttle governed engine with a hopper pool, with a water cooler on top as your hopper. This particular one was government surplus and was in Poughkeepsie at the Highway Department. This is a Dick's famous number E stalk cutter. And what it was used for was to chop either green or dried corn stalks so cattle would have. In summer they would chop green ones. In the winter they would take the ones that had been husked out in the field and they'd bring them in and run them through the chopper and chop them up and make cattle feed out of them. Of course it was much better in the summer because it was nice green corn. But you just shove them in this end and they come out all chopped up on you. log saw, and it's the forerunner to today's chainsaw. Can you imagine a man dragging this around the woods? It fell trees and cut them up in pieces. It's a witty 2.5 horsepower engine, water cooled, throttle governed. You've got the blade on the right here with all this gearing that runs it, so that the blade runs reasonably slow. And chops up, you chain it down to the log, that holds the saw in place. It was owned by Ken Brown of Millbrook, New York. The last thing he did with it was saw down a huge elm tree, brought it down and worked it up. In fact, I put it back running again for him after it sat for many years. And then he ended up giving it to me. Well, chainsaws came out right after World War II, and that was the end of these. This is a John Deere cement mixer. It's a John Deere engine that powers it, and the cement mixer actually, the whole thing was built by John Deere. I thought for many years it was something that had been put together by some blacksmith, and then I found literature from John Deere right in there. And this came from Innisfree Foundation in Millbrook. They were a good, reliable unit, and John Deere built an awful lot of gas engines, and they still have parts, ignition parts for them yet today. This is gasoline with a hopper on the top of the engine to cool the water. This is a 1900 Eureka ore crusher that we made to make crushed stone for where you need it in small quantity. Local towns would have these. This particular one belonged to the town of Woodstock, and the men from Woodstock recognized their old crusher. And that is belt driven, up a 5 horsepower engine. Don't ask me, it's 5 horse engine to run it. This is bluestone from Dutchess Quarry, and you need to use this type of rock. This is the hardest rock you can get. You do not put cobble rocks, round cobble rocks in, or it fires them out of the top of it. You use it where you were going to have to do road repair or something. You had a pile of stone, either back at the yard or had a stone wall or something, you could run through it and grind it up so that you could make crushed stone to fix roads, fix drains. The stone that would be generated here, Bear likes to have it. The soft spots out in the parking lot, making concrete, it does an actual useful purpose. This is the conveyor to take the stone that you crush and put it in a pile. Otherwise, you end up with a big pile just in front of the crusher and no place for the stone to go. It's driven by a witty 2.5 horsepower engine. It drives it with a belt, flat belt to do the driving. You'll see a lot of flat belts around here that are driving attachments. This is the engine that drives the rock crusher. It's a 5 horsepower witty gas engine. Runs on, you start on gas, run it on kerosene. Because it's a throttle governed engine, so you can do that. It's water cooled with the hopper on top of the engine. This is a canvas belt, and you'll notice that it runs with a twist in it, and that's on purpose. Because if you're in tight quarters and need to change the direction or rotation of the shaft, that changes it. Also, it takes a lot of the slop out of the belt that it runs with a twist into it, so it doesn't flop up and down. And it gives a lot more drive capacity because the belt drives more area than the pulley. And the last reason is to make people ask questions. This is an 1880 Ryder Erickson Sterling engine. This is a very early water pumping engine. That's what they primarily use for it. And it works on differential temperature between the well water that you pump and the heat of the stove. And that's the way the Sterling cycle is. It's a 1,250 pounds engine that put out less than a quarter of a horsepower. But it did a job at the time. It was far better than pumping water by hand. This one I found laying down in a swamp over on the R.G. Hill estate in West Park. It had been laying down the mud for over 50 years. People said I couldn't restore it. Now here it is. We started out, we had the fire on that side, and the cold water here, and the cold water that we pump chills this cylinder. When that displacer drops, it forces the cold air through the transfer port over to the hot dome, where it gets heated by the top of the stove, pushes the piston up. Piston comes down, forces the air back, and the air is re-chilled on this side. same air going back and forth over and over again. These were used well-to-do estates. The engine cost $210. So no average school teacher was going to buy one, because that was kind of for a year's salary. So they were used institutions, Lake Mohonk had one. They were used well-to-do estates and institutions to pump their water. And what you did, you pumped the water up into a overhead tank in your attic, and then you would have gravity feed water. So you'd run it a couple hours, you'd have 700 gallons of water pumped into your tank, and then you're letting gravity feed down. And you could have flush toilets and working faucets and everything in 1880, which the average person didn't have that. Well, by 1900, it was an obsolete engine. Short life, but they are working on the Stirling cycle engine again today. Very good in remote areas, foreign, some of the remote countries and stuff, because you can run it on right from the sun. The solar panel up and running. We have here a 4 horsepower Boice gasoline engine, copper cooled, Boice coil ignition with a spark plug. It's powering a Gould triplex pump. It's a high pressure water pump. This came off the Gifford estate, which is now part of the Carrier Arboretum. And they pumped the water up to an overhead tank out in the orchard, and you had gravity feed water. And they only used the place in the summer, so you just drained it in the winter. But this is the original piece, got its original paint. This pump would have come after the hot air engine, pumping engine. This is 1910 version. That was an awful lot more efficient pump, with pump a lot higher pressure and everything than the other. And water pumping was a very important thing to people. Because if you had greenhouses or cattle, you needed water. So water pumping got mechanized very early. It's, that running small boats is another thing. Hard to do it by hand. So. 1940s, it was used for the daughter can well recall the sound of it and everything when she was in bed early morning hearing the farmhand go down and fire it up and run water. Run the pump the tank up so you have running water for the day. This was a luxury that the average person didn't have. These were well-to-do estates that had this kind of equipment. Gould is still in business yet today. Maybe water pumps. This is a 6 horsepower Fairbanks Morse gasoline engine. Can run on kerosene once it's warmed up. It's a dual fuel engine. And it's powering a Boice. And this Boice unit was owned by Long Crane Service in Poughkeepsie. And would have been used to pick up material to put it up on roofs, where you needed a lift for that type of thing. We don't know its exact capacity, but I think you can lift until you pick the engine off the ground. It would pick up considerable. These Fairbanks Morse engines were very durable, fine engine that they actually built up into the 1940s. That same style of engine. Spark plug, high voltage ignition with spark plug. You'll see the open valves on the top of the head there, and the water jacket to cool it. This is a cylinder oiler right on the top here. That drips and oils the cylinder because you don't have a closed crankcase. This is an atmospheric operated intake valve, and these were used on hit and miss and throttle governed engines. Throttle governed engines means like you are today, where you've got a butterfly in the carburetor and you work the throttle. On the others, you hit and miss, the governor came up to speed and an arm flew out and held the exhaust valve in the open position. So you coasted with no compression. You coasted with no compression. There was no suction to operate the intake valve, so you didn't take fuel in. Otherwise you'd be drawing fuel and flood it all up and wasting the fuel. So this is a throttle governed engine, and the others that you see several of here are hit and miss engines. They fire and then they coast. They fire and they coast. And that was their type of governing. If they fired every time, they were over speed. They weren't intended to do that.
tractor is a 1928 McCormick Deering 1020. 1020 was the horsepower rating. They were 10 horsepower on the drawbar and 20 horsepower on the belt pulley, as they were rated by the Tractor Testing Association at the time they were manufactured. It was built by International Harvester. Has a 4-cylinder engine. It's 284 cubic inches, 3-speed transmission. The tractor would still do a good day's work. We've plowed with it several times. It would pull two 14-inch bottom trailer type plow in fairly rough going soil, and 16-inch bottoms if you had fairly easy plowing. But like I say, it was a good, solid, gear-driven, reliable, workhorse of a tractor. The steel lug wheels in that, they were kind of limited, obviously, to field use. They weren't allowed on any of the town roads as soon as it became oil and stone, or even in the early days, some of the dirt roads. It probably has about 400 or maybe 500 hours running the shingle mill for the club here sawing cedar shakes during the Dutchess County Fair, and it's got 75 or 100 hours of actual field work plowing on it in 20-something years since I have had it, and it's a good tractor. Pretty good sized 4-cylinder engine, overhead valves, just a lot of cast iron. The tractor weighed around 5,000 pounds wet as shipped with water and oil on it. Big old chunk of iron, but pretty simple and reliable. McCormick Deering warranted the main bearings of the engine for the life of the tractor, and they would probably still honor that right now if it was an open-ended thing. If you ever wore them out, the International Harvester McCormick Deering would give you new ball-bearing mains for the life of the tractor. I just thought that was kind of a neat little piece of history with them. Say they'd still do a good day's work.
This is a 1921 International Titan 1020 tractor. It runs on kerosene. You actually start it on gas, you run it on kerosene, and if you work it heavy, it has a separate carburetor for water. And the water injection cools the cylinder down and keeps it from dieseling. It's 2-cylinder, spark plug fired, 2 speeds, chain drive. The tank on the front is the water tank to cool it, and underneath it is the fuel tank for the fuel. What you're looking at here is the valve train into the engine. You see the exposed rocker arm and the valve. It's all on the oil. So we put manual oiling to frequent oiling to lubricate the valve and the valve train. And above it is your 2-part carburetor. The upper portion is for your kerosene, and the lower portion of it is for the water injection, so that it wouldn't diesel when you worked it hard. It's a dry air cleaner there. You got your brakes, your clutch here, and there's the starter. Dixie bought it new in 1921. Took delivery of it at the Main Street dock in Poughkeepsie and drove it home to Southern Dutchess. And what he used it for was to go around and do custom thrashing. That's why it doesn't have cleats on the wheels, because it had road run and they would bounce so badly. So belt power is a lot of what it did was drive big long belt. It ran longer than any that you see here. Because you had to get away from where the drain was because it was such a fire hazard. You didn't want a tractor belching out sparks into the drain. Also, the long belt drove much better. It's basically original. Sure, we've had to overhaul things on it because we use it, run it, and enjoy it. It's basically an original piece, and we like that. In fact, we like that effect on a lot of our machinery, to leave it original and not everything has to be painted. The hobby is going more and more that way, of leaving pieces of equipment as they were. Clean them up, make them function well. An awful lot of what it did was thrash grain. And what you would do is, you'd go out with a harvester, cut the grain, it could be oats, wheat, bring it in to a central come out one place, and you'd have your grain come out of another. Otherwise, before that, they did it by hand with a flail, a floor, and that was hard work. That was not the way to make any amount of grain. This could be used as a farm tractor in the field. With this type of cleats that are on the wheels, wouldn't have had as much drive power. If you were going to do heavy work, you could have bigger cleats for the wheels. But yes, it came with a plow, and you could plow and harrow, but it doesn't have any of the creature comforts of a modern tractor. It steers hard. You know you've done a day's work for this. This is a 1916 International Auto Wagon. It's a 3/4 ton truck. In 1916, they made 496 of them. In 1915, they made over 1,100 of them. So it's a very limited production unit. It's got a gasoline engine under the seat, 2-cylinder gasoline opposed, water cooled. Is it made of both water and air cooled? You'll notice on the side that it's got chain drive to the rear wheels, 2 forward speeds and a reverse. Top speed 17 miles an hour. We used it in the movie Ragtime. We had it down at Haverstraw, and we had it down at Irving Place in New York City. The uniqueness is that they were an early 2-cylinder opposed engine, and you know, you're getting back in your early trucks. 16 was getting real early for this type of vehicle. You got your Spartan throttle here. Not like today where that's all adjusted. This part, automatic, is manually done. A 2-speed transmission here. You got emergency brake and a brake pedal. I like very early vehicles, so it appealed to me. We found this in Pennsylvania. A collector had it. He had MGs and so on. This is one project he had, he couldn't contend with. He ended up buying it. And that was the late 70s.
Anybody have any questions?
Where is the original John Deere factory? Is it New York?
No, it was in Moline. The town of Moline. I'm trying to remember the state.
The Midwest, I know that.
I think it's Illinois.
Was it Indiana?
I think it's Moline, Illinois.
Illinois. That's correct. Yeah, Moline.
Any other questions?
Excuse me, what keeps the belts from running off those pulleys?
Pulleys are crowned slightly in the middle, and a belt, believe it or not, rides to the tight part instead of the loose part, so it rides up to the middle. Modern lawnmower manufacturers have never figured this out. They make split pulleys, they make split idler pulleys, the belt rides from one side or the other instead of the middle. If it was crowned, it would ride the middle pulley. But, that's how you keep them on. And it's amazing how few times we ever run a belt off.
The rest is careful alignment. There is still, the crown helps to a point, and then there is careful alignment of it as you set it up. And you'll see like some of the pictures, like the Rock Crusher belt looked like it had quite a bit of flap in it. As they get run longer and sit out in the sun, temperature increases, they dry out. They're made of canvas rubber. It's canvas impregnated with rubber in it to give it a little bit more drive, because canvas straight on its own is very slippery. But what will happen is they'll start off in the morning cold and wet and damp, they'll be tight. You'll stretch them on there, just wrestle them on to get them to go on. As they warm up throughout the day, they'll grow and grow. If you took a long belt, it would go, say, between the rock crusher and the engine that are 30, 40 feet apart. A belt like that could grow several inches in the course of a day, and then you'll move either the engine or the attachment to tighten it up. Next morning, you might not be able to get it on, you move it back, and then as it warms up, you go back to the same thing again. So there's a little bit of work to it to keep it there, but then the rest of it is the crown of the pulleys and then you get a good eye for lining them up after
Yeah, they
the
don't like
first
to get-
couple fall off. You
You don't wanna have them out in the rain, the camper belts, because it shrinks it up. You'll turn the attachment around. Fast.
they'll shrink, yeah,
It'll
the canvas
shrink.
wet will shrink like crazy, or the
The
leather.
reins were all running in different directions,
But
grab
they,
them on the belts and put them in the little shed.
The fellows from Woodstock realized years ago that it was their rock crusher that we had to put it in a yard sale in Elizabeth. So they told me there was a rock crusher. Went up there and hauled it on a utility trailer behind the Mustang. Both were overloaded. And, they knew it actually, part of the slap in the valve of it is that the shaft had been somewhat bent. And they had a rock get caught in the flywheel. And the same thing happened to us, and we had to straighten the shaft as close as we could. And then I made guards so that mishap couldn't happen again. Because it could be disastrous, could have busted a lot. So that's,
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
There are very few collections in the country that have been demonstrated as much as this collection has. Some of it's kind of worn out from being run. And we have to, keep working on them to keep them going.
You were in the film, weren't you?
Yeah.
I noticed that you treat those machines with great respect. I mean, this is what you call pre-OSHA, right? And you have all 10 fingers, don't you?
10 fingers.
That's amazing.
It's all 3 OSHAs.
Really. Has anybody been to the Dutchess County Fair to witness this particular?
Every year.
Yeah.
Every year, I tell you, if I go every year and I want to look at those machines, there's one. You're to be envied for having grown up with this wonderful collection of advanced toys. Because that's, I'm sure that's what they were to you.
I'd like to say
Charlie.
something,
Please, Charlie.
I'd like to say something about how good OSHA would have heart attacks. Based on what went on in farms. It was 6 or 8 years ago, I was at the fair running the shingle mill. And I was cutting the shingles off, and that's a pretty complicated job. Then over 90 degrees over here is a trimmer. That'll make nice smooth edges on the edge of the shingles. Well, I don't know what I did, but I looked down and I had a bloody knuckle. Then it started to hurt, it stings. I said, well, I gotta be careful, And within 2 minutes, I had another bloody nickel. That's it. I forgot the fellow's name that used to run it.
Les. Yeah.
Who?
Les Bartholomew.
Yeah. Well, that was the end of my playing around with the shingle mill. Now, the way my father and I, when I was a little kid in the country down on South Road, my father had a 1923 Chevrolet pickup truck. And when we brought old telephone poles home that the Central Hudson would leave for whoever wanted them, my father would split that, and we had a buzz saw called a buzz saw. My father would jack up our Chevy pickup truck, put it in reverse, and put a belt on the back wheel. Now, he had to put it in reverse, let's see. Either he put it in reverse, no, I guess he, figure 8 thing,
probably twisted
to
it.
keep the belt on the tire, because it was like narrow tires.
Yeah.
And we would cut telephone poles and maple trees and maple branches and all kinds of stuff to burn in our furnace. Because during the Depression and World War II, coal was rationed, and we had this big furnace in this basement. We had to burn telephone poles. And one day I was out doing my chores, feeding the chickens, and my father was burning an old tree stump that was in the chicken yard, and they used to burn them to get rid of them. And between the chicken house and our new garage, we had a pile of firewood to cut. And I looked in there, and I said, now I was like maybe 9 or 10 years old. I said, why is Daddy burning that firewood? Well, some sparks had drifted over from that tree stump into that pile of firewood and started burning. And man, I went and got my father. I said, Dad, why are you burning the firewood there? He said, whoa. Didn't bother to call the fire department because by the time they got down there from Millbrook, it would have been too late. You know, we started throwing water on it from our hand pump. We got it out, but I got my rear end tanned for standing there watching the fire. I said, you know, why are you burning that? So, but then my mother told me one time, my mother and her family lived on a farm, and I guess it's Unionville. I don't know where Route 55 and North and South Cross Road.
Yeah.
Cross.
Vale Farm.
Yeah, yeah. My mother was home there, and she saw, I'm not gonna say who it was, come riding over Route 55, but it was before Route 55 was built. Yelling and screaming and crying, they needed help because name is blank, got caught in that belt. And he was dead. Just tore him apart. He got caught, I don't know, his clothes or something got caught in that, and he went around there, and that was it. That's why I often think about OSHA. I said, boy, oh boy, they'd have a heart attack if they saw what used to go on
Yeah.
on farms. It was terrible, really terrible. That's
Charlie mentions the driving off the rear tire of the vehicle. When I bought the rock crusher from the people in Elizaville, that's what they did. They jacked up a pickup with a fender off the back, and they drove off the tire.
Yeah, that old 1923 Chevrolet pickup truck, that's the first vehicle I ever drove, and I think I was like 7 or 8 years old. I didn't really drive it. My father had engine trouble with it, and we coasted down that hill on Burbank Road, trying to get it, pop the clutch out and try to get the engine started, and it didn't. So, this had to be during World War II, because we had a 1938 Chevrolet. He got that turned around, and we towed it back up to our yard. And he said, now when I go in the driveway, because the driveway was a horseshoe shape, put the brake on so you don't run into the back of our new car. Well, I forgot which pedal was the brake. And I pressed down on that clutch pedal so hard, and I saw my truck was coming right to the back of our car. And I don't think I was like 7 or 8 years old. I didn't know what to do. I was pressing on the clutch pedal. So I turned the wheels. Missed our car, but the chain jerked the car sideways, and Charlie got another 10.
Didn't do you but a minute.
That was my first driving. Then I learned how to drive on a whippet. On the Miller estate up in Mavisville, Roswell Miller's place. He had 2 whippet. I guess they were cars, but they had cut them down and made estate fire trucks. And that's what Wade Somerville and I used to run around on that whippet. That's it.
Very good.
Anybody else, anything?
Yeah, any other questions? Allison, any questions?
On the, what was it, McCormick Deering tractor that Jimmy was riding, does that have any balance issues at all? You know, I'm just, when I first saw that, I thought, wow, if you're standing on the back of that and going up a hill,
The Titan tractor, you could drive it
maybe it's a
standing,
different tractor.
you could drive it standing or seated. You had the wooden platform.
Okay.
So if you're driving in someplace, visibility is terrible. You can't see anything through the engine, the flywheels, the fenders and that. You're getting up close to something that'll stand up and look where you get a good perspective on the wheels and that. But you can, you know, hillsides and whatnot, as much as you're gonna not make something that looks like that cumbersome, you could sit and, you know, and drive it. So it wasn't balance-wise, and it's only doing high gear's 3 miles an hour,
Oh.
and low gear is 1.5. It's barely detectable any difference when you're driving it, so
I guess
it
the
wasn't.
engine is so heavy in the front.
The weight's pretty well centered, you know, and down low between the wheels and up. Like tip over wise, it's like anything else on the side hill that you know, you had to exercise caution.
Yeah.
But for the time frame, it was that, or you know, feed the team of horses all winter when you weren't using them. The tractor, they could just back it in the shed, drain the water out. It was done till spring, you know, and fuel it and oil it in the spring, away you go again. So that's how they sold the investment in the tractor. They'd show all the things you could do with it, all the useful chores, and then you could just park it in the winter and didn't have to feed it all winter.
Just get
When
it
I
started up
purchased
in the
it
spring.
from Harold Robinson, I met him at the fair. He saw what we were doing, with old engines, told me what he had. And he had taken the tractor, it was taking up space in his shed. So I run it outdoors for 2 years. They got feeling bad, it shouldn't be sitting out. Thank goodness he got it running again, put it back in the shed. And he ran it for me when I got it. The fuel system, pump, and things like that didn't work, but it would run. And we've gotten some education on that thing over the years. Jimmy and I had to make new front wheel bearings for it. We're faced with having to do rear ones one of these times. It's had to have things done to it. It did a valve job, but head gets to it. It's original, and you just had to maintain it. All these things take maintenance. We spent a lot of time before the fair going over things.
Sure you do.
And trying not, I guess we made it through the last year, no problems with
Nothing major.
anything much at all.
Well, a lot of the machinery now has more time being displayed at the fair than it ever had on it when it was in
Oh,
use.
yeah.
There are a lot of pieces we calculated, like the 2-horse International engine is getting close to 2,000 hours of runtime on it from antique machinery shows and the fair display. So, you know, it may never have got that much on it in its entire life when it was new. So a certain element of things do get worn out. You have to do the maintenance and fabricate pieces and keep up with them. But versus having a static display where most people will only get a fraction of what it actually did or of the experience, you know, we like to see them run. So do the maintenance and just bear that. I've had people come up, oh, that should be in a museum. You're running it, you're wearing it out. Well, they could sit in the Smithsonian, but they already have a nice collection for static display. Or you could, you know, try to maintain it and do the repairs as necessary and get it out where people can see what it actually
This
did.
is real history, it's active
We got
history.
them all running,
Yeah,
start with when we got them, so they were overhauled and fixed.
yes. Millicent?
I just wanted to jump a leap of intellect for a minute. Your belt, does it have a particular name? It's not a
Flat belt.
a flat
Flat
belt.
Flat belt.
Okay, well,
Flat
in
belt.
physics, that's a Mobus plane, and it's a continuous single strip that goes back and around. And I have never seen one really working. I've only intellectually learned about a Mobus plane. And so I wanted to just put it together tonight on this wall, I guess.
Somebody actually wrote an article about that for one of the antique machinery
It's
magazines.
serious, it's
And
a,
how it tracks on the pulleys and the whole thing. With Morris
Exactly.
plane and the whole, which was way more in depth at the time than Joe average antique machinery collector,
Exactly.
the farmer was going to have, that was a
Because the
flat belt, my
farmer
grandpa
would just
told me
say,
that.
yeah, it's a belt,
But
it's a
it was
belt.
interesting
But
nonetheless.
it's not your typical belt, it's a seriously, I don't know, it's a physics problem, seriously.
It's a lot of
It's certainly a
physics
physics
problems.
challenge, that's for sure. Really, you can see these machines. Are you gonna run them this year at the fair?
Uh-huh.
We hope so.
You wanna see them up close? Go there. By the way, you have great respect for safety, and I know the fencing, I've noticed that up there. You position your machinery so that if anything were to happen, it's not gonna affect people on the outside. It's all
Very
thoughtful
thoughtful.
consideration.
Keep it, try to keep anything moving 5 feet at least.
Yes, exactly. But these are the machines that built America. They really were. Let me put a plug in for something related to it, but yet not directly related to it. See, we have a historical society member who also participates in that same lane at Dutchess Fair every year. Joe Magnarella, he's a blacksmith. Our own Joe, he's on our board of trustees, and full member of our. Joe runs the blacksmith shop.
Well, I don't run it.
You don't run it?
It's Asa Beckwith's display.
Oh, he runs the blower.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've seen you operate there so many times, and it's always a delight to
There's,
see.
there's two of us that do actually work in there. Asa used to, he's getting older, he's 90, what is he, 90 something?
But it's fantastic.
There's two other, myself and the guy that did the talk for you here, at one of these meetings.
Yes.
Tom Houseman.
I just wanted to know, are you only at the fair doing your blacksmith work, or do you have a
Yeah,
shop?
pretty much, no, I don't have a shop. Mostly at the fair, there are other blacksmith events that I do. One of them is Hancock Shaker Village, and that's the big one now. I'm winding down a little bit.
But you've also done them locally here, in the village.
Yeah, I've done them at the farmer's market, and a couple of times, I think, at the community day we had at the beginning.
It's a great, we have so much wealth of history in this thing. Jim,
But it's
thank
all
you.
the interest that people show. It encourages you to go on and store more things. You wouldn't believe the hours. Jimmy and I start early July trucking stuff from the fairgrounds.
Oh, I'll bet.
Of course, when the fair is over,
Then you gotta take it all home.
when you go there, you go, yeah, well, we had 5 trailers there. Equipment really moved the day after the fair.
I'll tell you,
With Tommy and
it's a fantastic display, much appreciated, and thank you. Thank you very much again for being with us tonight. You've got a great support team, good film. Okay, we have some refreshments in the back corner, and please stay, socialize. Thank you all for coming, drive safely home.